Here at the district, we promote a wide variety of conservation practices. And one of the challenges that we as a staff face is figuring out how to concisely communicate each of those practices to all of you, because every natural resource, every conservation practice, every property and parcel on Whidbey Island is all interconnected. Let's take, for example, what we're going to be talking about today, soil health. Healthy soil takes carbon out of the atmosphere, which is good for the air. Healthy soil captures and filters stormwater, which is good for our waterways, our ocean, and the entire marine ecosystem. Healthy soil builds healthy plants, which means that we put fewer synthetic fertilizers and fewer pesticides on those plants, which is good for our waterways, our pollinators, and the wildlife. So everything is really connected. I am here today with one of our natural resource planners, Gwendolyn Hannum, and she is going to tell us a little bit more about the connection between the soil health on your property and our water.
Thank you, Shannon. As our water resource specialist, before we jump into talking about the soils, I wanted to talk a wee bit about how I became a water resource specialist and got into water resource management. Ever since I was a little girl, my dad would take me to the beach and go take me to the tide pools and the aquarium, and I became absolutely obsessed with the ocean. And the more that I learned about the ocean, the more that I realized the ocean is directly impacted by what we do on the uplands, what we do on the lands, because most of the pollution that is coming from, or that is in the ocean, is not from the ocean, it's from the land, which then started my journey into water resource management. So let's talk a wee bit about the direct connection between water resources and our soil resources. First, I think it's important to understand that you cannot have one without the other. There are two fundamental elements that make up our world. And the way to understand them is really through our watersheds, and when there's a precipitation that happens in our mountains, that water slowly trickles down through the land and through the soils, and actually through our parcels, through our property lines, kind of as a domino, just coming down one after another until it eventually exits into the ocean. So how is water quality connected to soil quality? Depending upon the ecosystem that is living and thriving within the soil column, and that includes the microbes, the nutrients, any of the aggregates, roots, all of these things take an impact on what the environment is like in the soil column. And as water trickles down from upstream onto our property and then continuing on downstream, it actually carries with it whatever nutrients and whatever pesticides or herbicides or whatever excess chemicals are within the water column, within the soil column. What do I mean when I say a soil ecosystem? Well, within the soil column, there's an array of organisms that live within it, and they take up nutrients and they leave nutrients and they convert nutrients into something that's soluble to take up by another organism. When we have a healthy soil column, that's pretty self-sustaining. However, when we have an unhealthy soil system, there's usually a nutrient that is lacking or a nutrient that is in excess. And a lot of the sources from that come from when we're looking at our grass and maybe we see some weeds that we don't like, so we put some herbicide on it. Maybe in our garden we're having some issues with some aphids, so we put some pesticides on. These are insoluble materials or chemicals that don't break up in the soil column. So when they're put into the soil column, they're washed out and they're taken downstream, in the same way that when we apply too much fertilizer because we are trying to encourage our plants to grow and we think that adding more nutrients is better, sometimes it doesn't help because it washes downstream and eventually into Puget Sound. And much like a fishbowl, if you add too much nutrients into a fishbowl, the fish become unhealthy and they get sick and they don't thrive, and you end up with algae blooms or unwanted plants growing. You also kill some species and other species thrive. So it does have big consequences. What we do on the upland impacts what we do in Puget Sound. My top tips: not adding any synthetic chemicals, avoiding compacting the soil, and adding organic matter only when necessary, and keeping our soils covered, meaning no bare soils. It's also important to note that before we add any chemicals or any nutrients to our soils, to get them tested and make sure that they need it before you add it.